Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Agents to Owners podcast. With this today, is my pleasure to have from Orange, California, owner, agency principal of Conrey Insurance Brokers and Risk Management, Mr. Jerry Conrey. Jerry, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Brad. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to this nice conversation.
Yeah, me too. I've certainly enjoyed our conversations offline. You just have always have an excitement and just a lot of information to share. So I'm looking forward to sharing with our audience today. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, how you found this profession, and bring us up to you turning to independent in 2002.
Oh, it's actually an interesting story. I actually chose this career.
I know.
Career didn't choose me. I was probably 15, so this would have been like 1978, 79, when just before driving a car, I was on skateboards and bicycles with my buddies, and we'd go down to the local supermarket that had a strip center with a bunch of businesses in it. And I always a guy that appreciated cars. And I kept noticing that the best car in the entire parking lot belonged to this guy that kept walking into the State Farm Insurance Agency office, this little dinky little office in Hacienda Heights, California. But he'd pull up in this most beautiful Coupe de Ville, convertible Coupe de Ville Cadillac. Absolutely gorgeous, two-tone. I hope the guy still owns the car because it was that gorgeous. Catching a 15-year-old's eyes, and let's face it, 15-year-olds, we're more into sports cars and trucks and stuff like that, but this car was just extraordinary. And one day, I don't know what possessed me. I just went in the door.
Yeah.
And the lady's looking at this 15-year-old carrying a skateboard and like, what the hell do you want? And I said, I'd like to speak to the owner, the guy that owns that car out there. I've noticed his car for a long time, and I just want to understand, the business that he's in. Well, this guy took 20 minutes for me, and he talked to me about the career. And from that day, I realized that I didn't know whether I was going to choose insurance or not, but he explained the value of residual income. And that was, so the career I chose ended up being insurance because I felt that it was the best place for the opportunity to develop residual income. And that's my story. It's
an incredible story. I mean, one, for you to notice that and to have the gumption to walk into the office. How many 14 or 15-year-olds would do that? Maybe 1%. And then to sit down and understand, get an idea of insurance. Nobody's doing that. It's an amazing story.
Well, for those people that know me, gumption is not something that they would find that I would be short on.
Yeah.
At 15, I didn't realize I had it. I think my parents might have understood it, or maybe some of my teachers did, but I didn't. I just knew that I was curious. I knew that I wasn't afraid of things. And so I just, I knocked on the door, he answered the call, and that was it. I mean, it set all of this in motion. It's an absolutely wonderful story that I like sharing anytime somebody asks, because I find it to be so relevant in today that not enough people from industry go into junior highs and high schools and talk to kids about career opportunities. I mean, we used to have career day. There used to be people that came to campus to talk about all the different careers and the opportunities. And I just don't see that happening anymore. And I think that it's had an impact on an industry that has always been focused on community. And it was his community that he talked about. And as a State Farm agent, he was a farmer, where I, as a commercial agent, am more like a hunter. But it talks about the two marketing styles of an agency. And so, I don't know what you want to talk about today, but those are some of the things that, as folks are considering, hey, I can sell insurance, but am I right to own an agency? And if I am the most prolific salesperson, why don't I own an agency? when you start to consider those things, they also have to look at all the other responsibilities that come with the role that are not related to sales and and client relations. And that is, I guess, the whole focus of your podcast.
Yeah, it is. Let's touch on one. I think you bring up an interesting point. I want to back up a little bit to, I think most of us say a piece of what, we were drawn to into this business was the residual income.
Mm-hmm.
Do you recall, one, if you understood that concept when you were 14 or 15, and two, I wonder if that if that wouldn't be a good way to recruit into this industry, whether it's at the college level or high school level, because that is such a strong, that's the whole reason really that most of us are in it, the ability to earn that dollar over and over again.
Well, anybody that doesn't understand it, then they need to get an education on it. But if you're in and it's not all insurance, right? Health benefits are different. Life insurance is different. Annuity sales are different. But in the property and casualty space, the concept of writing a piece of business in 1 year and having a 90+% likelihood of it renewing the next year, and being paid for it again in exchange for being responsible for the relationship with the client and evolving the risk, and being the compiler. And I say compiler because I think it's important everybody to understand. Insurance companies talk one language and customers talk another.
Yeah.
Only successful agent, if you're going to be a successful agent, you have to be capable of compiling information and having it come out of you in a way that whoever it is that you're talking to understands what you're trying to convey. And the best agents are really, really good at that.
Yes.
And those that struggle aren't, and they need to work on that.
Yeah. So let's so what was your entry then into the insurance space from there?
So he was a State Farm agent. So of course the first company I called was State Farm, but at the time it was 1986. I was just finishing college, and 87, somewhere in that area. And they were going through a major change. They had been sued by a bunch of females that were denied agencies because of their gender, or at least that's what they felt was the reason why they were denied the opportunity to be an agency owner. And so they had sued State Farm. And so State Farm was under a court order, and they had to pay a bunch of money to a bunch of people that didn't get the job, and then offer careers to those. So not being a female at the time, I wasn't in the market that they were looking for to expand and grow. But Farmers Insurance was, and I got introduced to a district manager of Farmers who happened to occupy the same building that my mother worked in. And at that point, I went and met him, and it was just a matter of maybe 30 days later, I was involved in training for licensing.
Yeah. Okay. And then so you had a successful career as a producer, and then went on to become a district manager.
I spent 7 years as an agency owner, and in those, from 1988 to 95. And in that time, I became the largest commercial agent in California. And there were others that were writing that had more business aggregated because they wrote a bunch of condo association stuff. But I was the most prolific writer of new business at that time, and had won all their awards, and went to every event, and my wall looked like the awards looked like wallpaper. And then they had an opportunity. There was a district manager that was retiring after 30 years in the role. It was a nice district. It was close to me where I was. I knew several of the key agents in the district, and frankly, it's when somebody comes seeking you, it's very alluring. It's intoxicating. And so I was talked into becoming a district manager. And by the way, I also crave the idea of knowing more and learning more. Like the only thing I could see was the data on my agency, but a district manager could see the data on the district. Okay.
Yeah.
And the district manager opportunity ended up being a fairly good economic opportunity for me. So I took the cash value of my agency and they sold it to a former district manager, somebody that wanted out of the district management world. That should have been a sign. And I became a district manager, and I spent 5 years in that role. And then just found that Farmers was, they wanted to treat me as an independent. They wanted to treat me as a somebody who owned his own business, only when it came to tax time. And at all other times, they wanted to dictate how, when, where, what. And I was like having nothing to do with it. I was a true entrepreneur. I understood my role. I did not want to be told how to do it. I wanted to.
So let's jump into, you decided to leave your DM role because it wasn't for you, and you start your own.
Actually, let me be honest with you. They actually pushed me out. What happened was, they were starting to evolve to district managers becoming principals in the world of
financial services,
of investment.
Right? Yeah.
And here I had a district that at least half of the agencies could not properly write an auto or a home. And I was really frustrated with getting them to do the job right. And now they were putting me in a role and responsibility that if one of my agents failed to do the right thing, did not do the compliance correctly, did not do safe harbor with all this stuff, that it could subject me to being held accountable for it happening under my watch. And at the same time, it was and I looked at what kind of time investment it was going to be and what kind of money it was going to bring to the district. And I balked. And in a district managers meeting with 155 district managers, I stood up and asked questions that they were not prepared to answer. And it went from one question from me to 50 questions from 155 people, and they shut the meeting down. And then I became public enemy number one. And they tried to trump up, something it had to do with the SR-22, and I wasn't going to sit there and type them out for my people. So I dished them out to the agencies. They each had one, and when they would complete one, they could get another. And they didn't like that I did that on my own. And again, I owned the district. I was responsible. You're not going to tell me how to do it. And they tried to create an environment of termination under that scenario. And at that point in time, I said, if you really want to take me on, you can. Okay. But understand that for the next 5 years, I'm going to own your time. And my lawyer is going to is going to make you regret every bit of this. If you don't want me, I'll go, but you're going to have to pay for me to go. And so I signed a confidential agreement to leave, and they had to pay me to leave. And that was the difference and that's how I ended up, and I used that money to buy the agency that I own today. Okay. So that is exactly how I accomplished that.
Yeah. So let's talk about this new agency then. What was your mindset and strategy to grow this new agency?
Well, it was 2001. And I was in a absolute growth mindset at that time. Yeah. I was 38 years old, had the best of my business years ahead of me. And I just spent 5 years trying to get people to do things the way I thought it should be done, and realized that now I didn't have to do any of that. I would do it the way I thought it needed to be done. And if you came to work for me, you'd do it my way. And I realized that this was the exact scenario. Like I think that this was God laying everything out. I went from being a captive agent to an independent agent. I went from having a PhD in farmers to barely having a bachelor's degree in insurance when I realized all the different things I needed to learn about the independent world. The agency at the time was 75% personal lines. It generated about $700,000 a year in revenue. But it had all the right appointments.
Okay.
And recognizing that there was this plethora of opportunity, and that all that was missing was someone who recognized what was there. I purchased the agency, and by the way, I was the first SBA loan ever for the purchase of an insurance agency. Up to that point, they did not believe that the goodwill of insurance policies was collateralizable. And the bank that I went to, which was Community Bank, they and I convinced the SBA that they had it wrong. And now they're one of the biggest funders of agency purchases. And to this day, they have yet to have a default.
Okay.
They have yet to have a default on an agency loan. And why? Because it's such a good risk.
Yeah.
Why?
Right.
Because of the residual income.
Yeah. Yeah.
The very thing I learned at 15 years old.
Yeah. How many employees were in that existing agency when you took over?
There were 2 producers and 6 account managers and an accounting person. So it was a 10-person agency, including the principal. Okay. And today we're 17. But it's a very different environment, you know. Right. I don't have any accounting people. I outsource that. So a lot has evolved over the years, recognizing where efficiencies could be found. And now all of my people are here to either be a catcher and or a goalie to prevent a piece of business from leaving, and then producers who will help reel in new opportunities.
Yeah. When your emphasis is primarily on commercial. I imagine that's what it was when you took over. Did you jump back into that production role when you guys started?
Fortunately and unfortunately, I am the agency's rainmaker.
Yeah.
I generate most of the revenue of the agency. The 50 largest accounts of the agency are mine, and they generate about 70% of the revenue of the whole agency, those 50 accounts. The reality is that yes, I dove right into it, learned the markets, learned the opportunity, got to learn the underwriters, created relationships, got them to see what I'm capable of doing. They started to recognize that I wasn't typical, that I didn't just, write an app that was half-ass and email it in and hope and pray that they'd figure it out, but that I would engage the underwriter and talk about, it may not be a square and you might be looking for a square, but this is a great rectangle and it's just an elongated square. And if you look at the things that differentiate it between being a square and being a rectangle, I think that these are things that you guys would actually be willing to write if you just validated and verified through my communication what they do to prevent loss. And when I started to have success in underwriting in that way, I started to evolve the entire way the agency did business. And today we are an agency that leads with consultative risk management. And it's paid for through the successful sale of insurance. But really what we do is broker of record all the existing business that exists, have us control the account at its natural continuation date. And then between the time that we BOR it and that continuation date, which we need at least 6 months, we dive deep into the needs of the customer and help perfect the risk so that an underwriter would look at it differently than they do now. And that has been our nomenclature, but now we use it as our differentiator, and we're having success with it.
Yeah. Did you have markets specifically that you went after? And then how did you approach or market those industries?
Well, I inherited Hartford, Travelers. I inherited Liberty Mutual, CNA, some pretty big carriers. And, if you can't find risks that those 4 want, something's wrong, or you're a specialist and you need to go and get unique relationships with carriers that are in the space you're in. So all I did was figure out what they really, really wanted, and then did the research to figure out who out there did the thing that they really, really wanted, and then we would drip market to them, and make phone calls to convince them to that we're different and that you should talk to us. And we don't make phone calls anymore. We're now 100% referral agency. What I ended up doing was building a huge network of attorneys, CPAs, realtors, mortgage brokers, property managers, just folks who are influential and consultative in their relationship with risks. And then when I started to be a solution for their customers, then they started to refer me more. And then I started to see what they were good at, and I would refer my clients for things that they could help them with, auditing or human resource problems or legal problems. And that back and forth ended up being this whole style of being encircling this whole, I have this whole group of people that can help me solve whatever problems I encounter within a risk. And I actually prefer to find accounts that have had challenges because they're more interesting.
Yeah. So I want to kind of deep dive into this consultative approach, partially because that is what I'm diving into right now with the, with the markets that I'm trying to go after. So you have something that is called the Conrey difference. And you do such a great job of illustrating it. And I would recommend a lot of people actually to go to, the Conrey Insurance Broker's website. There's a lot of good information in there, but just look at his videos in the way that, he communicates. I think this is something that a lot of us should be doing a lot more of, specifically on our websites. But this is a video of yours called the Conrey difference. It's extremely well done. And, I think everybody should.
Wouldn't it be nice, actually great, if rising insurance and claims costs weren't draining the profitability and resources of your company? Isn't it high time you exit what we call the hamster wheel of the typical insurance broker's process? Where year after year they give you the same old spin about your rising insurance cost, whilst they pocket more of your hard-earned cash come renewal time. Have you been wondering if there's a better way? There is. We call it the Conrey difference. It's a fresh new approach to commercial insurance via risk management. How might you ask? Well, we consult with senior management, applying our proprietary methodology that utilizes the science of risk management and data analytics to identify and attack the root cause of what is actually driving up the cost of your insurance and putting a strain on management's limited resource of their time. From this analysis, we generate detailed reports utilizing our proprietary algorithm, helping the risk manager identify the root cause of what's driving up your costs and reducing your profit. And more importantly, the cost of distraction when those losses arise, something we know you're not measuring. In other words, Conrey Insurance Brokers and Risk Managers is much more than your typical broker. We can be your partner in increased profit. And let me address this now. We do this all on our dime, so there'll be no added cost to you for all this additional value. To learn more, contact us today at Conrey Insurance Brokers and Risk Managers and get off that proverbial wheel.
Well done. So let's talk about.
It still entertains me to watch. It does. I wrote every word of that.
Okay.
This is basically what is said in an initial conversation with a client. But I had to figure out a way to do it in 90 seconds or less.
Yeah.
And once I got the script in my head, I then sent it to a marketing agency and had their illustrator create this whiteboard because I purposely did not want to videotape this. And here's why. I didn't, I'm aging, everybody's aging, but this is timeless. And using the whiteboard also is less intimidating. It's like, it kind of, it's the animation kind of makes it approachable. And so even though there's big concepts that are being represented and the visuals, I think, are almost perfect for describing, the waste of time, like the spinning of all the plates at the end of the stick or trying to balance everything. And then, you see the little thing showing lawsuits, depositions, claims. These are the things that distract senior management from their strategic work. And what we've done is we found software that could help us help the C-suite of a business understand what their claims are actually costing them. A lot of people talk about total cost of risk. They say that term, T-core and everything. They don't freaking have any clue what that actually means.
Yeah.
Because if you are not measuring the impact of loss on the distraction of senior management that is no longer focused on the strategic work they do, you go and you look, and all we had to do was look at history. We'd look at things, and then we'd look at the year of a loss and the following year, and then we would see that the sales would be on a rise, and then suddenly the sales dip. And why? Because the person who's leading has been distracted, and they're not in their strategic place. When we were able to figure out how to put a dollar value on that, then we were able to get people to recognize that their insurance is costing a lot more than they realize it is. And then when they weren't, investing in, like for instance, maybe it's a risk that has 30 vehicles and they have an average of 2 accidents a year. So over the course of 5 years, they've had 10 accidents, but each of those accidents cost them 100 hours of time. Okay. Or what if it's trucks and the trucks have special equipment on it and it takes 60 days to repair a truck, and that truck is no longer in operation. And what about the revenue that truck generated? I have an MBA in finance. Half the employees I have master's degrees. And we took this data and we built an algorithm so that we could evaluate what the cost of all these things are. So yes, we look at 3 years of financials. We look at 3 years of premium history. We look at 3 years of claims history, and we plug all that in. But then we use actuarial data. We use Department of Labor data. We use Department of Commerce data, and we create a report that helps a CFO or a CEO understand that maybe this investment that they felt that they couldn't afford is costing them way more than they think than the money that they think they're saving, not spending the money. And we convince them then to do what needs to be done. So that risk that's had 8 auto losses or 10 auto losses in a 5-year period, we help them to recognize that with telematics, it's $20 a month per vehicle. It's $600 a month. It's $7,200 a year. But do you know how many hours you spent in depositions and in claims? And oh, by the way, if we don't save you in fuel what you're paying in telematics, I'll eat a hat. Because the minute your people know that you know exactly what speed they're going, where they're at, what route they took, what they're doing, whether they're parked in front of a bar or actually at the job site they're supposed to be at, when management has that level of awareness, it's amazing how efficient their operation becomes. And so we, through time and energy, just show people best practice. We draw them the straightest line to growing their profits. And we actually talk like financial people. We talk about the growth of profit, net profit, EBITDA, enterprise value. And because we understand that, we can talk in a way that most brokers can't. And that's the Conrey difference.
I agree with all that. And I like I said, I love your video. I wonder, and we talked a little bit before we jumped on, the ability to communicate with those that you're speaking to. So if it's a manufacturer, you're able to maybe tell that some of this language is going over their head. So you have to put it in terms that they can understand. That's a real skill.
Some of the most successful people in business today don't even have a high school education.
Yeah.
What they had was a great idea, great determination, and maybe an artistic bend, right? They saw a solution to something others didn't because of their way. And because they didn't fall in like little soldiers and go to school in a certain way, and they walk the beat of their own path, they become some of the most successful people in honestly, I can't tell you how many of my probably 10 of my top 50 are owned by folks that do not have a college degree. And when you start to realize that, I'm not putting down education at all.
Right.
But what I am sharing with you is that I talk differently to folks depending on their level of education and what I learn from them pretty quickly in the few minutes that we get to know each other. And I evolve my language and my skill. That's the compiling I talked about. I evolve the way I communicate so that I communicate at a level that still shows that I'm educated and that I'm going to help guide them, but not in any way putting them down for
Right.
what, because let's face it, they're in the catbird seat. They get to choose who they're going to work with. And that makes them the powerful person in the conversation. It isn't me, it's them. And so, if there's anything I could share out there with those producers in this world that are just looking to figure out why, learn that you can't treat every client the same way. Figure out how to treat that client uniquely, and you'll grow that relationship much quicker. And you'll actually have relationships where, to the point that I'm in stores and people see me and come over and say hi, and honestly, I don't remember who they are. And I have to fake it, and then they finally say something that I figure out who they are, and then it comes all flashing back to me. That might be the fact that I'm 60 now and I don't remember like I used to. But the point is that they actually feel a connection.
Yeah.
And you can feel a connection when you talk to people the way that they prefer to talk and the way they prefer to communicate.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the first things I thought when I watched that video was, if you say data analytics and you see someone's, if they start to gloss over a little bit, you have to shift of what you're actually referring to, here's your workers' comp claims, or, a lot of things you alluded to, and speak into their language and relate it back to what it's costing them.
Well, the biggest success that I've had to date is I was hired by a regional grocery chain as risk manager. And the grocery chain was, the broker on the grocery chain was none other than Marsh. Mm-hmm. And yet they came to Little Conrey agency to get advice. So they hired me as a risk manager, and they asked me to look into areas that they were having frustration. And their biggest area of frustration was they were having small slip and fall claims, and they were having work comp claims related to slip and fall. But they didn't even realize that was what was driving their losses. They just knew that they had so many losses. And so they presented all the data. And our ability to slice and dice data was that we learned that it was happening in the afternoons, that it was happening in particular departments of the stores. It was consistent in the stores. So it didn't matter what location the store was. It was the same place in the store that the losses were arising. And why? Because in the fruits and vegetables area, there's water. And they also would have these mats down that they thought was good for that. But the truth was that the mats were also a trip and fall hazard. So when we really did the deep dive and started looking at it, we realized that, maybe the problem was the flooring. Again, if you use risk management right, you get to root cause. You get to root cause by asking the right questions. Once you get to the point of figuring out what the root is, in this case, we felt that the problem was, we felt that the problem was footing and the ability for people to, and you can't tell your clients, you must wear non-slip shoes at our facility. So instead, we thought, well, can we change the flooring so that these shoes, any shoe can successfully navigate it if it happened to be a little bit wet. And we found a product by Armstrong that we thought was good, but the cost was going to be $70,000 in material and labor per store to install. Plus, they would lose 2 half days of production. So our little algorithm was able to determine exactly when they would have return on an investment. And each store was going to cost about $210,000, okay, between the cost of the materials, the labor, and the lost business. But that 210 really was like 140 because you also have to take the costs that weren't there. The labor wasn't there, the utilities weren't there. And if you're not smart, you're going to throw your numbers off. You have to help them understand what they truly were losing. Once we determined what that cost was, all we had to do was have 1 year of data so that we could justify. And they went from installing that store in that flooring in one store to installing that flooring in every store, because the return on investment was met at the 15th month. And every month thereafter, they have generated more profit as a result of that change.
Well, that's high level risk management right there.
It's just me.
Yeah.
So what really happened? I got in my car and drove and looked and met with people and talked to people. And everybody wants to talk to the CFO. For God's sakes, he's in a tower somewhere. Okay, you got to get down into the risk, and you got to talk to the people that are actually in it. And they were the ones that pointed out the issue. And I said, well, have you brought that? We brought it. No one listens, blah, blah, blah. So I realized that I had a lot of advocates that if senior management was savvy enough to ask, would support my hypothesis. And so I flipped it around and I became the megaphone of the everyday man that worked at that company. And senior management listened, and then they heard it from me. So then they went and did their research and found out that their employees thought the same thing. And suddenly it was as if my idea was this extraordinary thing. Yeah. And they could have just tapped into it all along, but they just dismissed it over and over.
Let's shift a little bit to you as the agency principal. How are you spending most of your time?
Well, I'm in the unique place of actually being a principal that prefers to be an agent.
Okay.
So even though I'm the broker of the agency and I own the 93% of it, I delegate all the things that I don't enjoy doing. I don't enjoy accounting. I don't enjoy hiring. I don't enjoy firing. I don't enjoy managing people. I like to manage risk, and I'm better at managing risk than I am people. So I hired a general manager. And he took most of that off of my plate, and there's been success with that, and there's been failure, but that failure would have been mine too. It isn't like he did anything that I didn't approve. So we have learned over time that you should spend a little bit more time hiring people than we were doing in 01 or 21 and 22, when the great resignation started to happen and people started to leave, even though they weren't unhappy. They just were convinced by family and by the news and everything else that they should, that there's more money out there if you go and demand it.
Yeah.
Most of them are not where they left me to go to. So clearly more money wasn't the thing that made them truly happy. We argued that all along. But we ended up hiring some folks that represented that they were capable of doing things they actually weren't. And I've spent 2 years trying to fix the relationships that were harmed because of trust broken by folks who represented that they were working when they weren't, or could do stuff that they couldn't. And, it's a hard lesson. And I think that some people say when it comes to hiring people that, if you hire the wrong person, whatever you paid them, the damage could be 2.5x of their salary. I believe that.
Yeah.
I totally believe that.
That sounds really difficult. I don't have an operations person or a manager, which is something I feel that our agency needs. And that's a really interesting, if you rely on that person to handle those tasks, and hiring being one of them, because I would love to be there too. Same, I think that's probably most of us. Most of us that came up as producers were driven by growth. We're driven by a vision, right? The managing people, that's not necessarily probably going to be most of our strong suits. So did that put some stress between yourself and the general manager, or the rest of the team, because ultimately your name's on the door? And
it is, but I learned a long time ago that I don't always have to be right.
Right. Ooh, yeah.
That that's a hard lesson to learn.
Yeah.
my face is not, I don't have to worry about saving my face. I want to argue with him and cajole, and because we get better. It's sort of like friction. You know, if you look at a diamond before it's been cut, you would just toss it aside as a funny looking rock. It isn't until it is cut, until the friction of the wheel is applied to it in the proper way, that you see what's really there. You need to do the same thing with your operation. You need to recognize your operation is a diamond in the rough, and that you always need to be perfecting its symmetry. And for me, David Aloyan, our GM, he brings that added vision. He is a professor of finance. He teaches it at university. I finally was able to convince him to give me his full-time attention, and he's paid accordingly, and he doesn't teach anymore. But his finance knowledge, and even though I have an MBA in finance, I've forgotten everything I learned, honestly, because I was hardly using it. Yeah. But because he was teaching it every day, he brought it into the agency, and it was his effort that helped evolve my risk management into something that others in the organization could do.
Yeah. So
he helped me, what's the right word? Commercialize it, make it, bringing components together to make a bigger and better machine. And so, look, there are many principals who are evolving to not be a producer, that they feel like that's what's holding them down. They don't want to work in the business. They want to work on the business. Yeah. Okay. I never stopped working on the business, but I've never found anyone working in the business that had the same passion, commitment, knowledge, or skill set to land the accounts like I have over the years. And now the challenge at 60 years old, now the challenge at looking at, the end is near. I have to evolve my operation so that other producers are capable of carrying those pails of water. And we're just now on step one of a 5-step process to evolve me out of that primary role. And so I'm going to take on the role of risk manager only, and I'm not going to do any brokering. And that's the way we're going to help accomplish this. And that way, even in retirement, I can still be around as a consultant when they need me. And if there's a relational thing that needs to be, that I need to insinuate myself into. But in the end, for us right now, we're looking to find a broker or two that would like to have the keys to the kingdom, because this agency is going to be transferred internally to those people who step up and are capable of carrying those pails of water. And I'm excited for them, and I'm excited for me, because it means that I can perpetuate my legacy instead of it just being absorbed by a Lockton or an Acrisure or somebody like that. I want our legacy to evolve and grow. And the way to do that is to bring others in and add them to the moniker, so that the agency isn't just Conrey, but maybe it's Conrey Jones, Conrey Smith and Jones, or whatever it happens to be. But I'm excited about the future, and I'm excited about, passing that torch, and I'm evolving my process to do it.
I bet you enjoy that mentoring piece. It just seems to be a passion of yours, right?
Well, this isn't my first collab cast I've done or podcast, because I'll stand up at a convention and give an answer, and everybody will look and go, "Who's that?" And where's he coming from? Yeah. And but operationally, I've been doing this for 35 years. I have seen the business go from where it was to where it is, and although I'm frustrated and I can't right now predict where it's going, because I don't know anybody that can. And if you can, I'd like to be introduced to that crystal ball. Yeah. But, I do know one thing, and that is that we're equipped to evolve, and we're open to evolving. And if you don't have a growth mindset, and there are two mindsets, there's a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. And if you don't understand this, Google it, read about it, learn about it. If you don't possess a proper growth mindset, you will not learn to ask the right questions. You will not challenge yourself the right way. You will not look at your operation and ask more questions. What you will do is sit on your laurels believing that you know everything. And that is the beginning of the death of your agency.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Yeah. It's agreed. As an agency principal, what have been some of your biggest challenges?
So the most frustrating thing for me is a lack of predictability. When the market is unpredictable, when underwriters are unpredictable, when a claim outcome is unpredictable, that is the biggest frustration for me. The other frustration is getting people to get it. You know, you get hired into this agency and you're taught very early on that this is a high level engagement, that we're looking for you to not be a paper pusher or a processor. We're looking for you to be a protector.
Yeah.
And to be a protector, you have to ask the client qualifying leading questions. You have to engage in the client in the right way. But what we have found is that most people just like processing. They like to push paper from one place to another, and they think that they're adding great value because they are really efficient at emailing. And I'm sorry, but you know what I'm looking for is client engagement. What does that conversation sound like? What questions did you ask and lead with? What kind of a follow-up email did you write that was a diary to the experience and acts as both a validator to the customer of what it was that was said, but it also acts as a documenter in the agency in case there's somebody that wants to recharacterize what actually was said later because it's more convenient. So agencies need to start, you know, every call at our agency is recorded, and we play roulette. And we will go and listen to those recordings, and half the time I cringe. I have to have a scotch when I do it, because I'm listening to this conversation, realizing that they didn't lead the way they needed to. They didn't ask the right questions, and so or they were not picking up on things the client was saying. And I didn't realize that these were innate in me because I've been told forever, and so I've recognized these things and evolved where others haven't. And now I'm starting to figure out how to train to that, but it's not easy because if it's not natural, you've got to train to it, and it's uncomfortable for folks.
Yeah, that's a perfect way to coach, though. I mean, for you to go over real, I mean, of offering alternative, thoughts and where you can collect more information or whatever it is. That's a perfect way for you to get in there. And if hopefully you have a team that is receptive to that.
Dave's job is to hire people that are.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, what we do is we say, look, we don't want you to forget everything that you know, but we kind of do. Because if we say this is how we do it, it's how we do it. Yeah. And we're totally open to doing it another way. But if you will have to go through the process of vetting it and proving that the other way is better, more efficient, greater results, again, more predictability. If that's the case, then we'll evolve our process to yours. But rarely does somebody come in with something that is so new and exciting. Maybe they could show us a trick in how to use the management system in a new way. That we always are open to learning, because I think most agencies use their management system as just a big data warehouse, and they hardly use the technology in the way that they could leverage it and use it. And for the money that they're spending on these systems, I spend enough to hire somebody. Mm-hmm. You better get something out of it. And to do that, you've got to invest the time and energy in what does this report look like? And what does it take to create that report? And what data goes into that report? And is that data accurate everywhere? And if it isn't, and it isn't consistent, then you don't have the roadmap that you need to drive your business. I am a business owner. Yeah. I am a businessman. I read my reports. I am constantly evaluating things based on data. And I'm also an open book. at our monthly meeting, we share financials.
Yeah.
I mean, I want them to understand where we're going and what we're trying to accomplish. And how do you do that if it's in a vacuum? So when the numbers aren't looking the way they're supposed to, I share them. When the numbers are looking the way they're supposed to, I share them. I let them see their success and I let them see their failures. And that way we can all, as a group and as a team, evolve.
Well, by sharing it, it gives the team a better idea of what the mission is, and it helps them understand this is why we do things the way
What's
we do
the
it.
impact, right? What is the financial impact of doing it or not doing it the way that you've been asked to do? Yeah, I think you're right.
Last question before we let you go. What would you like to see the Conrey Insurance improve on for 2024?
So 2023 has been a fairly flat year. Because of the having the wrong people in place in late 21 and 22, the impact was an attrition rate higher than it's ever been. And it sent a very clear message. It was all house business. It was all small commercial. It was not large accounts, and it was not relational accounts. Every producer grew by 11 to 15%, but the house lost 16 for the first time ever. And that's measured properly, where we average about a 7% attrition, a 92 to 3% retention. When the attrition got to 16%, it got my attention. And we also do what we call a rolling 12. And instead of looking at my numbers year over year, month by month, we look at a 12-month rolling year over year. So I see the impact of first quarter and second quarter 23 being terrible, and third quarter balancing it out, and now fourth quarter growing and making up for a big part of first and second quarters losses. And you start to realize that you're now on a trend. So if you start that rolling 12 months at July, we're on an 18% growth rate. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
If you aren't paying attention, you think that the actions that you're taking aren't effective because it's not impacting the numbers as quickly as you need them to, but they are. You're just not measuring them the right way. So for 2024, our focus is going to be, first of all, we've decided that we're going to service center all the small account business and orphan commercial business, because if we don't have a relationship, we think that the service center can actually do it more economically than we can. Two, we're going to, all producers in my agency now have to be industry specialists. So I'm the last generalist in the agency. Everybody else, it has to choose an industry and then become an expert in it and be known by it. And we will help them do that through relationships with things like the trade associations and whatnot. But we'll figure out how to keep their name relevant. But 2024 is going to be about us evolving to a truly middle market environment where it's upper small commercial and lower large commercial. Businesses that are between 10 and 50 million in revenue will be the focus, at least for finding new accounts. And that's going to be a huge boon in profit for us. It's also going to help my producers get to the $250,000 commission level as fast as possible. My most recent one got to $250,000 from 0 to $250,000 in personal income in 5 years. Now I want it to happen in 4. And so when you start to get to being able to promise people that kind of an income, and he's set now, all he has to do is continue to do what he's doing. I have to transition this business. If anybody out there is listening and they want to talk to me, they should, because the truth is that, if you're in a larger agency, a principal that owns 20% is still a principal. Yet they can focus on the area that they're very, very good, whether it's marketing, whether it's sales, whether it is people management, whether it's service management, whether it is finance. We figure out what their strength is, and they contribute that portion of ownership responsibility. And it's amazing how you don't have to be a me anymore. You don't have to be somebody that is a jack of all trades. And you can instead be what you really wanted to be, an owner that is also a relational producer and a consultant, a salesperson in the world of insurance. And that is exactly the opportunity. And so that's what's going to happen in 24. We're going to position ourselves. We're going to start to recruit and find the future owners of this agency. And then we're going to move them from zero to owning it and perpetuating it internally. And it will happen because it's my absolute desire to do it. And frankly, I don't want to sell and get a big check one day. I'd rather have a residual income right into my future. And help finance the purchase of the agency is just like residual income.
Yeah. I love it. Now this has been great. That's a big 24. And I would say that's a hell of an offer for people and should draw a lot of interest. It's very attractive.
I've talked to people. It's amazing how I talk to people, and they're these one-man bands, and they're so committed to growing it themselves that they don't see the opportunity that all the things that they're doing they could do within the organization, but then they have all the support they need to continue to grow. You know, it's one thing to be an owner of something and have 2 employees or 3 employees, and versus a partial owner of something that has 16 or 18 employees to support you.
Yeah.
It's amazing how that would evolve and change, but until you've experienced it, you don't know it. And frankly, there's probably a lot of people who have heard horror stories of people being promised stuff and it not being delivered. But if there's one thing that Jerry Conrey has a reputation of, is doing what he says he will.
Yeah.
And we'll put it in writing, because in the end, I wouldn't do it either if it wasn't in writing. So why would I ask somebody to do something I wouldn't do myself? I won't. Right. And that's part of why I think I've been successful. But I have to tell you, for any of you that are feeling totally frustrated with 23, like pulling out your hair, like wondering why you ever chose this, or maybe like you, Brad, maybe I want to go back to working for somebody else, you know, don't use this year as what you measure it by. It's in a great flux and transition. Most of it was created through the Great Resignation in 21 and 22. It's amazing the impact of COVID and what it did to our industry. That coupled with hyperinflation, coupled with legislatures that failed to act progressively in the world of prevention of loss, these things have to change. The states need to even the use of courts, because some have weaponized courts, and it's wrong. You know, a poor little business owner getting sued by somebody because they didn't have their website capable of being used by a blind person's reader.
Yeah.
A lot of folks don't even know that such technology exists. Further to that, most people don't realize that it's almost free to do, and it's not costly at all. And yet I have a little restaurateur, one of the most successful business owners. As far as sales per square foot, I don't think there's a restaurant in Orange County that can touch him. And right now he's being embattled by an attorney that's filed 750 of these kinds of lawsuits, representing somebody who claims, and you know what they're doing? They're just running around looking at websites so they could find one.
Right.
And then in fact, the lawsuit had so many errors in it, because the guy he's doing it so prolifically that he doesn't even correct the name or the type of business or all the things that are specific in a lawsuit. He just puts a new name, slaps it on, and it's amazing to me that our legislature can allow something like this. It's amazing to me that our courts don't sanction people like this. And it's amazing to me that they would be so one-sided that they would think that the one poor disabled person that was put out by some business owner's decision, that would equate to creating what they call PAGA in the state of California, which is where any attorney can act as a prosecutor. It's amazing to me. And the impact of it has been that all it's done is make charlatan attorneys wealthier by being a leech on business. So for somebody like me, I see this, I help them solve that problem. If you're a broker and you're not asking if these things are there, you're going to run into these problems. And all I could suggest is that we just start to listen and look at what's happening and evolve your process a little bit every year. And it's amazing how it will keep you relevant, and it will keep you in the know, and it will differentiate you from everybody else. And isn't that exactly what we need to do?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, we need to evolve. We need to adapt. 100%. Those that do will survive.
Well, Brad, thank you for your time.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. It was fun getting on here and talking. I hope we went where you wanted to
Oh,
go.
absolutely. It's been a joy. You are. I mean, I feel like you are a professor. That's what I feel like. If you're a professor of this industry, it's beautiful. I'm super excited. I know our audience is going to enjoy it. So thank you for your time.
You're very welcome.
Yeah. Everyone else, thank you for listening to another episode of the Agents to Owners podcast. We'll see you next week.
Bye all.